This episode is brought to you by Flex Dealer. Hey, auto industry. My guest today is Justin Friend. He's the Senior Vice President of Dealers United. And today we're going to talk about the power of humanizing your brand as part of your social media ad strategy. Justin, thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me this afternoon.
I mean, at time of recording, we are pre-NADA, time of release, slightly shortly after NADA. So you are sandwiched in giving people a sneak preview of what they will arrive at NADA to understand. I was particularly excited about your topic because I really think that 2025 is the year of authenticity. It's the year of reality, realistic, where, I think our human nature wants more and more authenticity. So I want to kick things off this way. From your vantage point as a senior vice president at Dealers United, being able to look in at so many different ad accounts and social accounts, what are some of the common mistakes you would say are happening on social, and what you would recommend to mitigate those mistakes?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think, mistakes can go in a bunch of different directions. Is it something technical? Is it not using the platform to its biggest, advantage or power? I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see, Michael, is just not letting dealerships who don't let their team have fun with social media and participate in social media. Speaking with a Ford dealer yesterday afternoon, and they had a ton of great organic content, all sorts of things, some silly things. They're literally throwing a ball in the showroom. There was a guy dressed up in a wild suit, like walking through the service department, but just, real authentic things that happen at the dealership. But I said to them, I'm like, wow, you guys seem, like a fun place to be. And they're like, yeah, this is us. This is how we really are. They're posting that content organically. So that's going into their feed on Meta. My suggestion to them, and again, I don't know if it's fair to call it a mistake or not, but take that content and amplify it out. Use a paid ad strategy to let shoppers who may be in your local community who don't know about you know that your dealership is a fun place. So when they show up and they may meet a salesperson virtually through social media, we've seen oftentimes, Michael, where if we put a particular salesperson out and we deliver that content to local shoppers, they may come in and say, hey, Michael, I saw Bill on an Instagram reel the other day. Can I work with Bill? So I would say that, if we're going to hone down to like one specific mistake that people may not be taking advantage of is just having fun and getting out there and letting their brand be known for something other than just vehicles.
Yeah. What's interesting, and I'm glad you threw the period after that last statement, because that, as you were saying this to me, I wrote down amplify authenticity with advertising. If I'm not willing to amplify what makes me authentic, that goes beyond, like you just said, the vehicle, then how deeply do I actually believe in the people in my organization? Like, shouldn't I want to amplify the thing that is unique? How do you recommend for the dealers listening in, how do you recommend to them to get comfortable with this? What's the starting point? How do you drag authentic, because I think most organizations, we kind of show up and we're afraid to be ourselves. Maybe we're too goofy, or maybe we're controversial or whatever. So, and I would imagine dealers, business owners in general might have this same concern. So how do you recommend allowing for your people to just be themselves?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a very good point. And, people have asked the question in the past, like, how do you train or qualify authenticity? To your point, what's too far in one direction or the other? I think it's going to vary, right? Every dealership is going to have a different level of tolerance for what may be over the line or not from a fun perspective. In terms of how to get it started, find your champion, right? Figure out who that one person could be. Who is the person that at the dealership is willing to get in front of the camera? And it doesn't, you know, I want to make sure I'm clear. It doesn't all have to be fun or goofy.
Right.
It could be simple things like having, someone who's willing to get out there and walk through the dealership and say, "Hey guys, listen, we have, 35 F-150s in stock. Here are the reasons why you should come down and visit our Ford dealership." I think it's a function of just getting out there, and oftentimes there can be a bigger risk in not doing it versus taking the chance. So I would encourage, dealers to find that champion, figure out what their, goal is, figure out what their concept is that they want to talk about, and then just go do it. If they need to work with a partner when it comes to, advertising and recommendations, sure. That is part of what Dealers United offers as a service, and there's hundreds of other agencies out there that can help with that as well.
What I love about this is it's kind of like if not you, then who kind of a scenario. Like if you're not going to be the one to start to do it. And then I think about just the landscape of dealers across America and, the better part of the world, which are most often in rural markets, smaller populations. And as you're saying all of this and I'm taking notes, I can't help but think like the opportunity of becoming the big fish in the small pond is so great. And often I think we get compared against a metropolitan dealer who's seems to have unlimited resources. This is, even though we're talking advertising and building authenticity into it, like it doesn't mean it has to be so expensive. Is that tracking for you with what you're seeing?
100% tracking. It really truly is. And, using your analogy of maybe the smaller dealer versus a larger dealer. And again, we work with big dealers, we work with smaller dealers. The reality is we're back to a time where inventory is really truly a commodity. The vehicle for the most part is a commodity. It's not so limited, it's not so scarce. So the important thing that we like to work with the dealers that we're helping from a marketing perspective is how do we differentiate your dealership, whether large or small, from the competition? Because if two Ford dealers, I keep going to Ford, if two Ford dealers have an F-150, arguably each Ford dealer could have a very similar or the same type of truck. If I'm a consumer, what can one Ford dealership do beyond just delivering me that piece of inventory to help me understand why I should do business with, them, why I should trust them, what they're all about, like all of that type of information is critical in the buyer journey. Like that's just it becomes so much more than just that one piece of inventory.
I love this because, there's varying opinions out there. There's people that say, why even bother with that type of information? Because, the car and driver and the, jalopnik and all of them are going to dominate you for it. But I think what you're saying that at least I'm picking up on here is yes. And you are still in a rural market that is localized. We know search engine and ad platforms want to deliver local relevant information. So you're essentially saying, what's your authentic spin on this? How are you seeing, I mean, we've come from, let's say the last 10 years where content for a car dealership was pretty uniform. I'll use that word across the board. Let's use the Ford dealers. It was like a Ford dealer in California and a Ford dealer in, Florida. And they were basically pumping out the exact same content at the same time. What are you seeing now for the successful dealers to maybe mitigate that or make it unique to them?
It's so funny that you say that because we do still see that all the time. I mean, like obviously our conversation is sort of headed down the social media path, but we look at SEM or PPC, so Google paid ads. We also look at search engine optimization, SEO, and there are often times, Michael, where we will find I'll call it cookie cutter, right? One dealer in one territory is doing the same exact content, the same image, the same copy, the same everything as a dealer in another territory. So you have two big challenges there. One, it's not unique. So if a dealer on one side of the country and the other side of the country are doing the same thing, you got to assume that the dealership right up the street is also doing the same thing. So you're not
Right.
unique. We also have found and know that what works in a major metro market is going to be different potentially than what works in a smaller market from a targeting perspective, from a keyword perspective, from the number of available shoppers, monthly active users on any of the social media channels. So I think having that, I'll say customized or custom tailored strategy, uh, in my opinion, gone are the days of a one size fits all cookie cutter strategy from a marketing perspective.
What then do we advertise? So if we use the example that you brought up earlier, teams got some goofy characters. They like to have fun. Guys walking around the showroom in a unique suit. What is an example of something they would do with that? I mean, because my worry is always, not so much now, but in the past, I mean, that camera turns on, you might be the most personable, and then all of a sudden the camera's on and you're like, and today we are going to, so what do they do with that authenticity, if you will?
Yeah, and you raise a very valid point, right? You need to have a full funnel strategy. So something with that, we're calling it authenticity, but that very like humanized, individual, personal type of content, that's part of the strategy. It's not all of the strategy. So
Mm,
that's very much, if we talk about a marketing funnel, top of funnel, that, Michael, is very much like top of funnel type awareness advertising. So that could be an introduction, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be the silly, fun, goofy stuff. Think about community initiatives. Think about things that dealers do to support local communities. Big believer in the fact that dealerships are the cornerstone of many communities. They give back. They're philanthropic. They have events and galas and foundations that they give back to the local community. So sometimes it's just a function of putting that type of information out there. Um, from there, it then does turn into a buyer journey for the local shopper. And sure, we're going to talk about getting them back to the dealership's website. Maybe we get them back to a specific, VDP, vehicle detail page, so we can land them on a vehicle. But part of what we do is making sure that that journey from a consumer's perspective is going to vary based on the steps and the information that we know about them. So it's not just this like one size fits all. Using you as an example, if you're a shopper, you're a consumer, and maybe you engage with one of our silly, goofy examples of creative that we set up. Maybe there's somebody playing a guitar and that really resonates with you. You get back to the dealership's website. If you're clicking on a Mustang, for example, I don't know why we're stuck on Ford, but it's all good. You click on a Mustang, but then I deliver you content that's focused on an F-150, and we see that. You asked me before about mistakes. We see that. I totally missed the mark
right.
with you as a consumer.
I mean, this goes right back to understanding audiences and understanding that not every vehicle is made for every customer, right? I know that sounds like, when I say it that way, it sounds pretty foolish. I can feel the eye rolls from here out in the ether. It's like, well, duh, obviously a minivan is made for a family. And it's like, but also painters and some tradespeople. And until we like understand the demos or the varying demos of each of the vehicles, then what happens, I feel like, is then the advertising becomes blasé. It becomes, to your point, very cookie cutter. And like you said, then you miss the mark. It's like you should have met that everything you knew or that the data can tell us about that person interested in the Mustang should have followed them right through to the point of sale and beyond. Hey, does your marketing agency suck? Listen, before we hop back into this episode, I know you know me as the host of the Dealer Playbook, but did you also know that I'm the CEO of Flex Dealer, an agency that's helping dealers capture better quality leads from local SEO and hyper-targeted ads that convert? So if you want to sell more cars and finally have a partner that's in it with you that doesn't suck, visit flexdealer.com. Let's hop back into this episode.
And to support that further,
Yeah.
you know, you asked me earlier about potential mistakes and challenges. Sometimes one of the challenges that we see is just focusing on a single platform. You talked about targeting. You talked about the small business, the painter, the plumber, whatever the case may be. Targeting is also a function of different types of platforms. So, if, for example, we had a dealership that has tons and tons of third row SUVs, we know that third row SUV is typically a family vehicle. Oftentimes a mom is driving that family vehicle. That could get some of
Yep.
those same eye rolls. So I'm with you. We know that 80% of US moms are spending time on Pinterest. They may also be on Meta or another channel, Instagram, Facebook, whatever the case may be. But when it comes to targeting, that's a great opportunity to not only know your audience, but know the right platform to reach that shopper.
And we know they're on Pinterest because of all of the weekend DIY projects that I currently have on the go.
You and me both, brother.
Yeah. We're in a club. Isn't that interesting? Because I think majority of the time focus right now is, the standards, Google, Facebook, and then OTT, some sort of OTT, right? That people seem to be throwing that around, which is why I appreciate you bringing up the full funnel strategy, that it's not one touch point, one and done. I think our industry sometimes suffers from absolutism. Is that a thing? Or did I just become George Bush? I'm making up words. We gravitate towards absolutes. I don't want anybody to hear what we're talking about today and think, oh, he said humanize your brand. That's all you got to do. I love that you are qualifying this and saying, no, there's a full funnel strategy. Humanizing your brand is you use the word introduction, which I think is perfectly placed for people to get to know you. And I love that you brought up the guitar because, well, guitar and the suggestion there of tapping into people's interests that perhaps reach beyond just a vehicle. So why aren't more dealers doing this, in your opinion?
I think there's still a lack of knowledge. I certainly don't want to say a lack of education, but I think it's a lack of knowledge and just not understanding exactly how to best leverage, a full funnel strategy that's looking at every possible channel out there.
Right.
I think sometimes there's some just hesitancy from moving away from the standards, right? You mentioned like, hey, Google, cool, we checked the box. Facebook, cool, we checked the box. I think sometimes there's just some hesitancy from moving beyond that and willing to explore additional options. But at the end of the day, everything we're talking about kind of funnels down to technology in one way or another. There's got to be testing and learning and iterating with technology. So I think oftentimes it's either a lack of knowledge or a lack of eagerness or desire to kind of change what is conventional. Like how often do we hear, well, we do it this way because that's what we've always done. It's like, well, that's okay, but sometimes you have to change in order to change.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, look at where we are at now in our civilization's history, where all the futurists are saying we're experiencing 100 years of change every 5 years now.
Right.
Things are evolving. Consumer appetites are evolving. There's so many different, the EV topic and, different regulations that are changing our appetites. Still, we see, and I want to kind of go down this path for a minute, which is the marrying the authenticity to the why us. When push comes to shove, I just think there's and this is not car dealers. This is just human nature. I think we when we're focused on ourselves, we like all creativity kind of goes out the door, and we end up with a message that sounds like this. And hey, send me a message if you're listening this and this resonates. We end up with this message: family owned and operated for over 50 years. Like, that is the most creative crack at authenticity that like I drove to where was I driving? Arkansas. And along the way, I must have saw 20 billboards for different dealers or dealer groups. That's like family owned and operated for over 50 years, family owned and operated 70 years, insert time frame here. From your perspective, I can't help but think they're trying to convey something, but they don't have the words to convey it. I mean, what's your take?
Yeah. So here's what I would say. That's fantastic. So what? And I'm not saying that in a bad way, with no disrespect whatsoever. I have so many people in this industry that are not only partners, but truly people that I consider friends, that are second and third generation dealers, and I think it is fantastic. So to me, those billboards, man, that is awesome. That is something that they should be proud of. But it's the next step, which I think is sort of what you're challenging. It's like
Right.
that. Okay, cool. So what? How do we take it from it's awesome you've been in business for 50 years? That means that you've done, from a community perspective, you've done a good job. From a business perspective, you've done a good job because you're still standing. That's awesome. But if I'm a shopper, if I'm a consumer, okay, cool. So what? We've been in business for 50 years and we have more inventory than anybody else. And we have the best prices and we have the best that, like, I think there needs to be that next step.
Kind of a continuation. Yeah,
That's it.
your so what is not so what you're an idiot. It's so what's
It
next? What does that
that's
mean?
it.
Like, what's the implication of that? Um, and then baking that into, you said the champion. So making sure that your champion understands your so what. So
Yes.
what, which ties into kind of the heart of this message, which is the so why. What is your why of all of this? Like, what moves you, and why should people? Why should a shopper? You brought up differentiating competition. Why should a car shopper choose us when, like you said, commodity wise, they could go anywhere? What's the differentiator? So what are your thoughts as we move into this new year that dealers should be focused on? We've talked authenticity and humanizing in
Mhm.
the funnel. From a so what perspective and a why perspective, what are some thoughts you have?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is customer experience. And customer experience can be any part of the dealership, showroom, service, parts, waiting area, whatever the case may be. As a society, we want to have an excellent customer experience. And I think that's one of the critical things that dealerships do very well to separate themselves from, you know, uh, others who may not be doing so well. I don't know if this is too far of a stretch, but if you think about, a restaurant, right? Oftentimes we're going to go and look up, hey, how many stars did this restaurant receive on Google or Yelp or wherever we're looking? And that can be how we make our decisions. So I think having that customer experience from a dealership perspective is a great place to have that so what or so why. Beyond that, it's some of the less tangible things. What are we talked about it. What are some of the things that you're doing for the community? How can you better improve the way that consumers feel about you? Service, part, sales,
Right.
all of that type of information. But I would boil it down to customer experience.
And I mean, like, gosh, the minute you bring up customer experience, I take the beeline rate to culture, because it's like so many dealers have there's so many conversations in our industry that bring up culture, and I desperately want that to not be the next buzzword. I want it to be tangible. A lot of dealers struggle to figure out how to quantify culture, but I think it's what you're saying. It's evidenced, healthy culture is evidenced in customers walking away being like, holy crap, that was the best time I had. I didn't want to actually
Yep.
leave.
Yeah, or I mean, the other side of that is like, man, I didn't hate that experience. Unfortunately, so many people think that going to go to a car dealership is awful. Personally,
Right.
I love it. Obviously, I'm in the industry, um, but I think being able to change that notion, and to your point, like, hey, I don't want to leave, but also you referring the dealership that you had a great experience with to your friend or your neighbor, or you get that new vehicle and someone's like, man, Michael, love your new ride. Where'd you get it? Oh, I bought it from so and so. I had such a great experience. That's going to plant that seed in the back of their mind that when they're ready for the vehicle, that hey, my buddy Michael had a great experience. I'm gonna go check them out, assuming they have the type of car that I'm looking for.
It's kind of like it's a hyperloop, if you will, that feeds itself, because in that context, the advertising takes on a whole new meaning. I think often when we say advertising, we think, oh, ad budget, yada, yada, yada. But it's like, no, what's the implication of having a healthy culture that people enjoy working at, of them then talking about where they work with some measure of pride to the people that they know, and then the implication of those people coming in and having a good experience and then telling the people they know, like, with some tweaks, you could easily have a flywheel, if you will, of opportunities flowing into your business based on authenticity, based on a genuine care and concern for your customers, and maybe maybe just maybe then the family owned and operated slogan goes away, and it's like, because every customer said they'll never buy a car from somewhere else ever again, like, or I don't know, like that.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wind down how quickly the time can go, give us a sneak peek on how you're going to wrap this together at NADA for maybe those that aren't able to attend. You're speaking at NADA this coming week at time of recording. If you're listening in the future, Justin spoke at NADA in 2025, and it was awesome. And it was about this topic. Obviously, you're going to get into more detail. Give us a little sneak peek, though, on how you're going to tie everything together.
Sure. So at NADA, I'm speaking with a guy named Jay Healy. He's the chief marketing officer for the Healy Brothers Auto Group. They're in the Hudson Valley, New York region. We've been working with Jay and his team for, I don't know, probably 5 years at this point. What we are talking about is we are sharing some of the very specific strategies that we use for Healy. Our session is called 17 Battle Tested Ad Strategies. And at the end of the day, our goal is to share with people who are in attendance, like, actionable things that if they get home from NADA on Monday, or if you're listening in the future, Monday already happened, but things that you can put into place like right now to help improve, your strategy. So we have 17, as it's called, 17 battle tested ad strategies, and we're pretty excited to share them with the crowd at NADA.
Sounds like it's going to be amazing. Hey, man, thank you so much for joining me on the pod. How can those listening or watching connect with you?
Sure. Happy to share my email. It's justin@dealersunited.com. You can always find me on LinkedIn. Love to have people visit our website, which is dealersunited.com. And those are the easiest ways.
You're the man. Thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook Podcast. Hey, thanks for listening to the Dealer Playbook Podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please subscribe, share, and hit that like button. You can also join us and the DPB community on social media. Check back next week for a new Dealer Playbook episode. Thanks so much for joining.